Hey everybody, Metal Shop Steve here. Another album review. This one is an album that just came out in January, and again, it's something that's been on my radar. I'm finally going to talk about it. This one specifically has been on my radar because of the fact that it is associated, at least by members, with Dream Theater. And you know I love Dream Theater if you've watched some of my old videos. So this is Sons of Apollo, and really kind of a super group when you really think about it. I'm going to talk to that point in a sec. But the album is called Roman numerals MMXX, which of course means 2020. Really fantastic album here, Sons of Apollo. Very strong album. I've been seeing it kind of pop up in all of my social media feeds because I follow Dream Theater, I follow Mike Portnoy, and that's where we'll start with the members of the band. Again, kind of a super group. Mike Portnoy, drummer, kind of the soul leader of this band in terms of the soul of the band. That's what I mean. And for those of you familiar with Dream Theater, you will certainly know the name and you will certainly know the drumming. Also, somebody who spent some time in Dream Theater, Derek Chernian. He is the keyboardist. He spent some time in Dream Theater. He also spent some time playing with other really great musicians like Steve Vai and Yngwie Malmsteen. Couldn't say Derek's name, but I could get Yngwie right? Okay. Next up, Ron Thal on guitar, and he spent some time in Guns N' Roses, and currently, I believe his most recent gig, aside from the supergroup thing, is with Asia. So, kind of rolling right along here, another name that you will certainly recognize if you're a metal fan or a rock fan is Billy Sheehan. Most notable for his time in Mr. Big. And if you're not familiar with Mr. Big other than their big hit To Be With You, then go back and check them out because they can rock. Anyway, he's the bassist. He is an extraordinary bassist, and you'll see why when you listen to this. And then finally on vocals, Jeff Scott Soto. Also somebody who spent some time with Yngwie, and also some time with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. So really a band that has some chops. And as soon as you start listening to this, you'll know, of course, there's that progressive flavor just because, listening to the stuff I mentioned there, you know that there's definitely a progressive flavor involved. But this is, it's like, heavy progressive dark roast. Something like that. So 8 tracks on this album. Again, the album is called 2020 in Roman numerals, and we'll talk about the tracks here. So it opens with Goodbye, Divinity. And I'd say for a lot of the tracks, for me anyway, and maybe it's just because I was listening to this through my Mike Portnoy ear, drums. The drums are kind of what drives a lot of the songs on here, especially in this one. The first song, the drums really stand out. The drums kind of providing that pounding setup for the whole thing. The riffs kick in, Jeff's vocals kick in, so gritty and hard. To give you comparisons, I'm not really even sure where I'd go. Maybe Prong, Tommy Victor, maybe even a little bit of later Anthrax when they're experimenting with vocalists. So there's a little bit of that there. Again, kind of side road, but there's a nice interlude in this song. Some of the songs are longer. This one has a little interlude in it, and it's kind of a full band solo. It's kind of an oxymoron there, but full band solo. They're kind of all just jamming it out and letting their talent speak for themselves. So much is happening in the song. It is such a full, layered, no downtime kind of song. Next up, I have 2 favorites on this album. I'm going to get to them. First, one of my favorites is this next song, Wither to Black. And this one is where really the first chance on the album that you really get the idea that it's not going to be a Dream Theater album. Nor is it a Mr. Big album or any other stuff that I mentioned earlier in influences. It is completely its own thing. It's darker. It starts off with these, again, the pounding drums and bass into this, this driving riff, really aggressive and shredding, heavy guitar. It's really a guitar-driven sound, I would say. Definitely a throwback to heavier hard rock, maybe of the 80s, maybe early 90s kind of sound. Again, not quite hardcore, but like hardcore progressive, perhaps. Definitely a very aggressive song. I love it. One of my 2 favorite songs on the album here. Next up, Asphyxiation. This one it's kind of growly, it's sinister, it's dark, but you can really say that about a lot of the songs on this album. They're dark. They have certainly a very somber, it's not a happy, upbeat kind of album. It's a very strong, powerful, kind of in-your-face type of feel to it, which surprised me the first time I heard this. I was expecting something a little more maybe atmospheric or Dream Theater sounding. So next up after that is Desolate July. And this one does start out a little moody, a little bit more what you'd think of kind of progressive music sounding like. It's piano-based or keyboard-based, it's moody. And then it just launches into this power, this explosion. It's not necessarily one of the harder, heavier songs on the album, but through the vocals and the lyrics, you really get this raw, powerful emotion, which makes it sound heavier than it probably actually is. But it's very, it just builds and builds and builds all the way through. And that's pretty cool. I like that. King of Delusion next. This one has kind of a chunky swagger to start it out. It's a little bit soft in the middle. They kind of give you a time just for a second to breathe, and then it starts building back up again toward the end. So that's King of Delusion. The next one up, the sixth song on the album, is my next favorite song to mention, Fall to Ascend. What I like about it is, I don't know, it's just kind of, again, it's solid, it's grooving metal, it's everything kind of this band in a nutshell. It's just really what they do best. A lot of different pieces of that, pounding drums and bass. And that's really something that sets this apart from maybe more of your traditional progressive type of sound, is that this is really low-end driven. It's riffy. The solo in here actually is something that caught my ear, that was really kind of completely different from the rest of the album. There's almost a southern rock vibe or feel to the solo. And I listened to it a couple of different times just to make sure I wasn't hearing things. But nope, I heard it. It's kind of this southern rock, southern bluesy rock kind of swagger to the solo. And that's really cool. That's kind of like finding this little hidden bit in a song. And it works really well. I like it a lot. They follow that up with Resurrection Day, another rocker. And then finally, they finish the album with the longest song, and the one that you would probably be expecting more of with this type of a setup, this type of a group, these guys. New World Today. And it's almost 16 minutes long. It's the epic of the album. It is the true progressive sounding, atmospheric, switching back and forth between slow and fast, a lot of tempo changes, heavy to less heavy to atmospheric, back to heavy. Everything that you expect out of one of these big, meandering, progressive type of songs. And they really do put everything that they can do musically into this one song. Everybody gets to show off pretty much everything that they can do musically with each instrument somewhere within this song. So it's almost like if they were being asked as a band to try out for something and they said, all right, let's give you everything that we've got, they put it into this song. So that's that. 8 songs on this album, really solid. And this is one that the more I listen to, the more I like it. I was driven by the Dream Theater connection there to begin with, but once I listened to it, I realized it was nothing like Dream Theater, but it was really rocking and awesome all the same. So go check it out, 2020, or as maybe those of you who are not that familiar, MMXX by Sons of Apollo. That's it for this review. Thanks for coming by.